I'm super passionate about people continuing their education. And when I say education, I don't mean paying exorbitant amounts of money to organizations, establishments, and whatnot, but actually trying to figure things out for themselves. I taught myself to code with free resources online and through perseverance and experimentation. I think we need to do this in all facets of our lives. Whether if it's our relationships, we need to experiment with and have more opportunities to engage with people. The same goes for personal finance. This is a concern to most people living paycheck to paycheck. I have lived most of my life that, and until recently, I decided to take the reins and really stop making excuses and going ahead and making myself feel more comfortable about the future. I've worked in tech, I've educated people in tech because I thought that teaching people how to code helps them get income and lift them out of poverty to start making a life for themselves. I, and probably a lot of other people too, fell into the mistake that having a high income means you're rich or that you're well off. It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, people tend to spend their paycheck. Expenses just come up and they'll just use it. Or they'll buy this for a quality of life or buy that for a quality of life. And that isn't to say that I haven't done those things and that I don't still do them now. But I have consciously decided to take financial independence to the next level in my life. I started at the beginning of 2020, of all years, to start a journey of getting out of this rat race of paycheck to paycheck. Let me react to some of the people and their personal financial situation. This is just my opinion. This isn't me judging, but just offering out suggestions to all of us and even just talk about my psychology when I'm trying to wrangle finances in my head. What does it mean to live paycheck to paycheck? It means that your income that comes in just covers your expenses, and maybe it doesn't even cover your full expenses, and you end up going into debt. This is also known as a cash flow problem. Cash flow it describes the cash coming into your account and then going out of your account. Now, if you are spending more than the money that's coming in, that's a problem. That's a problem with cash flow. If you're spending less, then your cash flow is pretty good. You've got this excess amount of money that you can do something with. Now, that is what's happening here with this Paycheck to Paycheck Nation. People are having a cash flow problem. Let's take a look at the story, and you'll notice this story, I don't know what it's trying to say, but the way it's saying it is a bit confusing. So let's go into it. Okay, a house, 2 cars, a kid in college. Debbie and Nick had all the markers of the middle class life. They both remember one purchase where Nick bought a bass amplifier that prompted one of the biggest fights in the 4 decades of marriage. He didn't tell me that he hid it in the trunk of the car, and I found it, Debbie laughing, 14 years later. So this expense, this $600 was 14 years ago, and it caused an argument. Was this a frivolous thing that he bought, or was this for his hobby, or was it for a band? There's zero to no context in this, and they're bringing up something from 14 years ago, yet they look like they're having problems now. So again, I don't know what they're trying to say here, other than that maybe they've had a problem for most of their life with their finances. An unexpected bill like that, so it's not a bill, it's a purchase, unless it is for a band or something like that where it is a source of revenue. But it looks like he was in tech, so I don't know why this is called a bill. Is what separates millions of Americans from financial disaster. In fact, survey after survey for years has found that most people in the US live paycheck to paycheck. Today, amid the pandemic, a third of US adults are having difficulty covering their everyday expenses such as food, rent and car payments. While people in the lowest incomes face the biggest challenges, even some households making 200k are straining for basic expenses. This is quite common in people. When their income increases, they find new ways to spend it, whether if that's a newer, bigger house, a more luxurious car. They look at spending the income that comes in, because they think that consuming is the status of wealth, when maybe it's not the case at all. You may look at people, like even celebrities, for example. They may leverage their income and buy assets, and then they hit rock bottom and then they lose it all. That's because they're not financially literate. They haven't deployed their cash into assets that work for them. For many families, walking the tightrope of financial stress with little to no savings. Now, they said savings. If you look in this article, it talks about savings a couple of times, but it's always about like having more savings or no savings or retirement savings. But they don't talk about investments, which is, I think, a miss for this article. But it may be that the person who wrote this article just wanted to tell a story and not provide any solutions for anybody. Little to no savings is hardly a pandemic-specific condition. Over a year ago, more than a third of Americans said that they could not cover an unexpected $400 bill for, like, whether if it's for a repair or a hospital, without going into debt or at all. So $400 going into debt. I think it's trying to say here debt is bad, which is a common sense kind of approach to finance. But let's say, for example, you somehow manage to get an extra $200 in cash flow a month, or even $100 in cash flow a month. Now, if you pay your minimum payments on that $400, it's not going to be like $100, it's going to be like $50 or whatnot. Let's say that you have that cash flow every month, that extra $100. Within 4 months, you could pay that off. So people need to be trained to say, okay, I can go into debt if I have to, but I can pay it off. Obviously, there's better ways to organize your finances, but I just wanted to address that, like, without going into debt. Like, debt is this huge bad thing, but sometimes that's what all you can leverage at a certain point in your financial journey, is that you've got a certain amount of income, so then you can get a certain amount of debt, and that you can service, whether if it's minimum payments, and then plus the principal of some extra cash flow that you've got every month. I think if you're at this point in your financial journey, you're struggling, to live month to month, but you should be starting to look at how can you generate cash flow, whether if that's through 3 different ways, right? There's reducing your outgoings, there's increasing your incomings, whether if that's through side hustles or getting a promotion at work. Maybe you go into debt for $100 for a course, let's say, and you skill up, and then that can actually generate more income than $100. It's a bit of give and pull. And then the third way is doing both of those. Lowering your outgoing expenses and increasing your income. That's how you increase cash flow. Now, there's this graph here saying that 1 in 3 adults are having trouble paying expenses. And obviously, at the lowest parts of the income, it's a lot more people are doing it. But on average, 1 in 3 having difficulties paying their basic food, rent, mortgage, car payments, medical expenses, and student loans. Indeed, the paycheck-to-paycheck lifestyle has been a long, widespread affliction. Single mothers live it, young professionals live it, even college professors and retired tech workers live it. Like that couple earlier on, Nick and Debbie from Pennsylvania. They were among the 3 households that NPR took a look at their monthly budgets before and during the pandemic. The budgets offer a window into how life's costs can sometimes leave a little financial wiggle room. What goes in comes out. That's exactly the cash flow problem that I'm talking about. It looks like Debbie and Nick have a spreadsheet. At least they have a spreadsheet of their expenses. Now it's what you do with that knowledge. What's the point of having a budget if you don't budget something to help yourself for the future? Now, some people would say, oh, put that into savings so that you have the cash at hand to pay for things. But often putting cash in a bank account, especially in this pandemic time where over 33% of the cash that's in circulation has been printed in the last year, isn't doing you any favors. And you can see that from these rising costs here. You see that the college tuition has gone up 50% since 2000. But if you look at the S&P 500, let's go to 2000, which is about here. It was 1300, and right now it is 3500. So let's say 3500 divided by 1500. So it's gone up 233%. Let's go back to the article, and we see that if you put money into the S&P 500, you would be at 233%. Now, imagine chatting that graph on here. If you invested, if you put money, your savings, into the S&P 500, you would beat inflation on your income. You'd beat inflation on housing costs, healthcare, and college tuition. So putting money in savings is a bad idea. Putting your money into investments is a good idea because the cash appreciates over time. You acquire dividends, and you can also do things like borrow against that rather than going into debt, and you keep the asset working for you. It keeps appreciating in capital, but you're taking a loan against it. It's just like a mortgage, but you're doing it for your stock assets. Let's take a look at this other example. I don't feel, even if I am saving, I'm ever going to get ahead of anything. That's because you're not, because saving isn't going to get you ahead. It's only going to make some expenses sting a little less. Whereas if you invest, that's the only way that you can get out of the paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. You have to accumulate enough wealth where your assets can pay for your expenses. And that's what I say escape velocity is. You've got to keep contributing to these accounts where it goes hockey stick for your expenses. When it hits that limit, then you can live with more peace and resilience in life. I feel it's a constant struggle. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I do. I've had payday loans. I've had collection agencies after me. I've lived paycheck to paycheck most of my life. I knew early on this year in 2020 of all years that I wanted to get to that escape velocity where I'm not worrying about my income source, and that all the assets that I can put together and aside, that I will be able to live happily and comfortably no matter what comes my way. I think this pandemic should awaken a lot of people to become more resilient, because the government isn't going to come and save you. The government is arguing right now whether if they want to give you $600 or $2,000. That is disgusting, and we need to take it into our own hands because they're not going to come and save us, right? I shouldn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. Well, that's true, and there's a way to get out of it, but it's got to come from yourself and a determination to do this. Rhonda calls them little spendings. Nothing special or life-altering. New tyres swiped onto a credit card, a last-minute birthday gift, soccer cleats, shin guards, gloves for the younger teenager. I have 4 kids. I know how that feels as well. My eldest played soccer. She obviously needed her dues. She needed all the things that come with that. And yeah, it went on a credit card. I know that my cash flow can pay the credit card off, but it's all those little things. How can you accommodate that into your lifestyle or budget or whatever? When people budget, some people go to the extreme where they say, hey, this amount of money this month is going to go towards birthday gifts for friends or kids or other things like that. And they really go through the year and they try and budget those kind of expenses. Now, I think that may be a bit overkill, But maybe take a look at those expenses for a couple of months, like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and then average it out for that 3 month period, and then extrapolate that out for the year. And now include that as a budget item in your monthly budget, and then maybe put that into savings so it's easy to access and you can use it for whenever you need to spend on those little things. Or maybe that's your credit card budget. So you say, I'm only going to spend up to this on the credit card, and then I'll pay that off in full every month. You don't think about it, or you do after you've done it, and you're like, God, what did I do? I don't know. Like, do you say, God, what did I do when I buy those cleats? Or what are you saying here? What are you buying here where you go, God, what did I do? I know it's a struggle. You want to get things that make you happy. Often credit is so tempting to use. I can just pay it off later. Just don't get out of control on credit. You've got to pay that down as much as possible and use it as a tool rather than a vice, like to try and fix your mental state to say, oh, this is going to make me feel happy, Debt is powerful, which is why most Americans have it. Debt is powerful. With great power comes great responsibility, as Uncle Ben would say. For Rhonda, a loan helped her discover a dental assistant career that she both loves the work and the pay. So she likes the pay and she likes the work. That's great. A loan, I don't know how much the loan was, but was it worth it? We'll see. I don't know. After never going to the dentist until she was 18, she now geeks out learning about gum surgery, earning about $45,000 a year. A series of false starts came first. Pressure to be the first in the family to attend college. Okay, I guess the main thing to take away from some of this is that pressure to spend, pressure to buy something to be like somebody else, whether if it's the latest iPhone, whether if it's, I don't know, all of the societal things about like going to college. Does it make sense to even go to college for the career that you want? A lot of resources are online now that can teach you things for free. Obviously for dental and medical things you need to attend a college. But she went to culinary school first with another student loan to try and get into food service jobs. She had a marriage and a house, a bankruptcy and a divorce. So like, I don't understand, the details of this, but obviously having a divorce is financially wrecking to anybody. The debt can bog you down. When her personal crises piled up, the sale of the dental practice where she worked pushed her into a new job. Oh boy, a lot of things has happened to her, and some of the things are outside of her control. And that's the whole point of being financially resilient, is that when these things do happen, we are less likely to fall on hard times. Now, sometimes it's events like this that trigger new behavior in people that they never want to be in this situation again, and they work as hard as they can to overcome this. I had an event that happened to me at work that really kicked my butt into line in terms of I never want to be in a position where my livelihood and my kids' future is in jeopardy because of the primary source of my income. I took it upon myself to do all the things that are necessary to at least start on the path and then get on the path to financial independence. Rhonda felt overwhelmed with her loans and bills. She cashed out her retirement savings early and paid some of them off. Wow, she had to take out a 401k, so she would have had to pay income tax on that and then a 10% penalty fee. If you do it over the pandemic, I think you get less of a penalty. I'm not quite sure. But she paid off bills and loans with it. Now, it doesn't say how old she was. Oh, she's 45 years old. So, I don't know when this happened, but she spent all of her retirement savings, all of it. It says she cashed out her retirement, all of it early to pay off loans and bills. She still kept several credit cards. You never know what might happen. Like a world with a pandemic, perhaps, or like losing that new job at the very start of it. So she lost a job at the very beginning of the pandemic. That's awful. Rhonda has deferred her mortgage and some utilities. Life trudges on despite the global crisis. A minor surgery gets scheduled. Her oldest starts driving and needs car insurance. The younger one needs that soccer gear. Oh boy, so this is what happened before the pandemic, and this is what happens after the pandemic. So she's got car loans and home loans. She's got water bills, a cell phone and insurance, groceries and meals out, some health insurance here, or maybe health payments, and 297 on something else. Here you can see there is a cash flow problem. The spending is more than the income. So she must put some things on credit card. She has to, because there's no cash, right? So I would assume most of that would be on groceries and meals out. So if you take a look at her living expenses during the pandemic, obviously she's taken a reduction in her meals out probably. That is a good start. But obviously in hindsight, it would have been better to even just reduce this to, say, $500, where you could still be eating out some of the month, but you'd probably increase your cash flow a little bit so you could at least put some money aside. So she pulled out a 401k savings. Well, they're not really savings, they're investments that could have compounded over time for a larger sum for when she's 60. And it looks like she may have paid something off, but it actually looks like her car payments may be still being paid. Her mortgage is probably deferred, right? See, largely deferred in July. So what did that savings go to? Was it for credit card bills? And then the credit card bills are what's covering this deficit here. That isn't going to last very long, especially if you've got 45k income and several credit cards. You're not going to live for much longer. Now, it looks like she's doing unemployment, but she's getting a paycheck for $188. Now, I can't really suggest anything right now because it's way too late. I wonder if there's some gig economy stuff that she can do, but I don't think Uber or Lyft is really a thing right now. Is there things in a house that she can sell on eBay? You know, are there other things that she can use to at least make this less of an issue? But the idea is, I hope when she gets her employment back, that she can take a look at her cash flow, her expenditure, and figure out a way to put a portion of her income into some investment so that she can leverage that in the future, because right now it's looking pretty dire, and I'm sorry for Rhonda and her family. You're trying to be careful, and then like, this sucks. I make decent money and I shouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck. And that's the thing. You make decent money and you shouldn't live paycheck to paycheck. And the shouldn't comes from your behavior. Like cell phones. Say, for example, you could go to something like Mint Mobile, which has less fees, or T-Mobile, you know, move into different carriers, changing different insurance providers. Actually, your credit score can affect the quotes that you get on insurance. So if you're trying to improve your credit score, you can improve your insurance. Meals out, you can reduce. That's how you stop living paycheck to paycheck. I know you want to have the benefits of making decent money, but you need to be rewarding your future self. In all of the budgets in this article, it doesn't say anything about savings, or it doesn't say anything really about investments or paying yourself first. You'll hear a lot where people say, out of my paycheck, I pay myself first. And what does that mean? Well, it could be putting it in a savings account, which is pretty bad investments right now. That being said, speak to a licensed professional. That take my word for it. This is just entertainment purposes. There's no concept in the budget where it says pay yourself Think about the money that you earn, and you think that that goes to consuming things. Well, if you think of it a different way, where the money that you earn is yours and you can put it to work for you, that changes your mindset. And it really changed my mindset. Beginning of this year in 2020, I started putting money away in one account. And then it went to 2 accounts, then it went to 3 accounts, and then it went to 4 accounts, and then at the beginning of 2021, there's 5 different accounts that I'm putting money aside into now, all with different risk profiles, and I'll talk about that in a different video. But once you start investing, it changes your mindset on how you can deploy your cash to earn money for you. Rhonda wishes that schools would teach money management. It's way more important sometimes than algebra or geometry. Exactly. I think this is a disservice that we've done to everybody, is not being able to understand the concepts of cash flow. It does seem so self-evident, but we don't talk about it. We all get in the trap of getting into credit card debt and using that for these emergencies and things like that. I would go even a step further. I would say that we need to teach kids how to invest. In other words, to convert money into wealth. Now, wealth is a misunderstood concept. And in fact, you see a lot of it in our political dialogue today, that wealthy people are somehow evil, or they've got all these resources and it's just so bad. And it makes people feel that they shouldn't be becoming wealthy. For herself, she looked at going back to train as a hygienist too, but that's another $30,000 in student loans, more debt she's not ready to take on. I've got to commend her that she looked into it and didn't go into it initially, because it looked like in her previous life, you know, she went to culinary school, it didn't really work out. Then she did some dental hygienist work. I guess it's not hygienist, it's some other auxiliary position at a dentist. And then she thought, oh, well, maybe I can do this to increase my income. It really depends on how much a hygienist pays. If it pays double, maybe 30,000 isn't that big of a deal. But I'm glad she stepped back just to think about it before taking on too much debt. And obviously during the pandemic, and you see her cash flow, she's got over $1,000 deficit in a monthly outgoing. So I can appreciate her being cautious here. Now we're going to talk about education. Education is super important in order for you to level up your career. And it's super important when you go into education that you know what you're going into in order to have that career that you would like. I think most careers can be learnt through experimentation, but certain careers require the rigorous college work, whether if it's like in the medical industry, for example. Now, I think there's going to be a reckoning coming about how expensive education is. But why is education expensive? Is it because the quality of the materials has improved over time? I went to college to learn computer games programming. One of my professors had material from 5 years ago that hasn't been updated and has errors in. I don't think I was getting the value out of my college degree for the amount I was paying for it. And in fact, I could earn a living in the computer industry because I was self-taught. So I think there needs to be a reckoning, and I think it's already happening in computer science, where people can learn to code outside of university and they can become naturally talented at it through experimentation. And it doesn't matter university anymore, you know, with that subject. And with the access to cheap money through loans, because obviously the person who's paying for the education is getting the money for free at the point of sale and then deferring that payment off into the future. So it's got a psychological perspective like, oh yeah, I can just go into college and learn this, when in fact that they may not even like the degree that they're getting, and it may be in a field where they're not passionate about anymore, and they end up paying a loan on something that is really worthless to them. And maybe having a degree on your resume does help show potential employers that you can stick to something for 4 years, but is that really the trait that you want to put ahead of everything else? So Robbie is 28. She spent virtually all her savings to go out of her home in Houston to move to Austin for massage school. Between classes, she worked at a salon around the corner. That's great. Sweeping hair and doing laundry. Her boss paid her state licensing exam as a Christmas gift, shelling out $200 that Robbie can't afford. Okay, this is great. She's going out to work. She's trying to dampen the cost of living, right? Doing these classes. And her boss gave her a gift of $200, which she couldn't afford. So, again, look at your budget. What can you save literally every month that could pay towards that $200 or bill of that equivalent? She owes more than $10,000 in student debt, but has kept it in forbearance or on hold, trying to get to the point where paying my student loans wouldn't actually break me. I honestly don't understand massage school, if you can get student loans for that, or whether if this is for a different exam. But obviously there is state licensing to become a masseuse, it looks like, and it's $200. So again, I don't know what this 10,000 student loan is for. Maybe you can let me know this in the comments. But it just goes to show that even the student loans can break you. It can really affect the incomings and outgoings of your monthly expenditure. So if you're young and you're thinking about going to college and you're watching this video, think about that cheap money that you think is free at the beginning and you can get this education, but you're not necessarily making the salary that you expect, and you're in a state of poverty as a result of that loan. Just think about that. The debt relief plus full-time massage therapy work, $24 an hour, that's good, with generous tips, had Robbie feeling a solid financial footing for the first time in her life. Fantastic. I didn't know what to do with myself, she says. When you start making more money, you can upgrade your bills a little bit. And there it is. Most people, when they get more income, they upgrade. They upgrade their phones, they upgrade their plans. Maybe they'll get 4K Netflix or, things like that. Yeah, there it is. She said, I got a new phone. I was like, this is a whole new world for me. Start living more comfortably, paycheck to paycheck. So exactly. You live more comfortably paycheck to paycheck, but you're still on the precipice of poverty if anything goes wrong. That's what you don't want to be in, is you're upgrading your life, but then it's going to be so much more disastrous when that all goes away, whether if it's through a pandemic, through job loss, or things like that. The move to Austin proved more difficult for Robbie's boyfriend, Andrew, 30. America's music capital lured him with the promise of lucrative opportunities for his line of work in audio and video tech. Moving anywhere for any reason is expensive. You've got to re-establish yourself. You need to network more, which is fine, but there's also expenses associated with that, whether if it's going out, buying new clothes, things like that. When you move to a new place, sometimes you get rid of stuff in your old place, or you need to buy new stuff in your new place that you didn't expect. I've just had a friend who's moved out to Texas and he had to buy a $3,000 tower in order to get internet. Back in Houston, a phone call or two had him running visuals for a big oil board meeting or shepherding rock stars to concert sets. In Austin, he struggled to book enough gigs even after slicing his rates. Again, moving has cost you in more ways than what you thought. Your old network that you had access to was your lifeline. It was your income. when you move somewhere else, you've got to re-establish it. And then he's cutting his rates, he's slicing his rates. Often that can have a negative effect as well, because people think you're cheap and that your work won't be that good. So even when you're cutting your rates, you may even attract clients who don't understand the cost of your work. I used to be a freelance web developer, and when I was starting out, I cut my rates, and I had a load of people contacting me, messing with me, didn't understand the true cost of what it costs to make a website, and it made more trouble for me. So even if you slice your rates and you do get business, it may not be the best business that you want to attract. It's a real struggle. Building that network again for the first time in a new area is going to be a challenge. Once the show stopped coming in, I was completely at a loss, and I have been pivoting ever since. You see this in a lot of young people who move to these big metropolitan areas, whether it's Los Angeles or Seattle, or whether it's Portland, Oregon, Austin, Texas. You see a lot of people who are young who are attracted that there's going to be opportunity, and a lot of people are looking for that same opportunity as you. So it's very competitive, and you end up pivoting to something else that maybe you don't have the full skill set yet, and you're having to reset your career. And resetting your career at 30 may be okay, but 30 is halfway to 60. So what are you going to do to get in a position when you're in retirement age where you aren't worrying about your finances? The pandemic has undercut both of their careers. Cancel live events means no work for Andrew. Robbie hasn't done much massage therapy since spring, relying on unemployment benefits and the occasional side hustles. Andrew is now baking at a restaurant at $17 an hour. Still, that isn't bad, and I'm glad that he's willing to pivot and work for these things. But let's have a look at their monthly budgets before and after. And I think there's going to be some surprising things in here. Before, their income was $4,095, and they were only overspending about $170. And that includes rent, cell phones, insurance, car loans, and student loans. That's not too bad. Other things includes gas, prescriptions, clothes, and video games. Obviously, $700 is quite a lot of money. Gas, I would imagine, is probably $100 to $200 of that. So prescriptions, clothes, and other things. So now let's look at their post-pandemic income. Actually, with their unemployment benefits, they're actually making $4,400 more than they were last time. And as you can see, their expenses have actually scaled. They've increased by 50% during the pandemic because they had this excess income. And I say because they had this excess income because he financed a TV and chose to pay it off. Now, TVs don't have to be $931. In fact, you could buy a 4K Samsung Smart TV for about $300. This is quite a lot more than you particularly need. Now, they've also gone into financing a bicycle and a puppy. I don't know how or why it would cost $1,000 more. And why would financing a bicycle not be in debt? You see, this article, how it categorizes things is weird. But also the deferring payments. Why are you deferring payments if you can afford it? Because the sooner you're out of debt, the better, right? Then you've also got this $2,000. What are you doing with that $2,000 extra a month? You could be saving that aside when maybe the benefits aren't as good as they are right now. Or you could be investing that money into any number of asset classes that will appreciate over time and that you can use in the future. So I don't know what you're doing here, but I would recommend you save for a rainy day, i.e. invest, and try not to do quite a lot of these extra luxuries during a time of a pandemic, because they do go on to say that they do splurges at GameStop for Nintendo or Google Video for streaming and things like that, maybe look at memberships to HBO Go or something like that, or HBO Max. You can get a lot of content for $14 a month, and often there's a lot of promotions. There are ways to consume video games as well with Microsoft Game Pass, which is a monthly fee rather than the $60 price tag for a new game and things like that. Could you buy games when they're on sale or when they're at the end of a life cycle? I bought a lot of PlayStation games for $20 or even $10 when they've been out for a while, but I still wanted to have that experience. And when you sell them or resell them, you get almost all your money back. There are ways to enjoy yourself without splurging every month on some of these things, because the enjoyment of, say, playing Spider-Man 2 years later is just as good as experiencing it on that first day of buying it at the $60. Financially, it kind of feels like going up and down on a roller coaster, Andrew says. I'm able to stay above water miraculously sometimes, but other times it's too close for comfort. And as you can see, before the pandemic, it was close to comfort. It looks like they're on a high on a roller coaster right now during the pandemic, which is lucky for them. But this is the idea, is to try and level all this out, right? Is stop spending excess when you know what your outgoings were. Your outgoings should have fixed or gone down during the pandemic. For example, I was able to refinance during the pandemic, and that enabled my outgoings to go down, which enabled me to pay myself more, i.e. invest in the future. And that's maybe something that anybody can do, is reduce your expenditure by some means and then invest that money. Now, if you deferred your payments to invest, maybe that's worth deferring for, especially if there's no penalties on the deferment. If there are penalties on the deferment, then maybe it's just better to get it out of the way. Let's go back to Debbie and Nick. After the amplifier fight, budgeting became a serious business. A painstaking accounting of birthday presents and vet visits, car payments, utilities, that ran 12 pages long. 3 children, one more expense or another always popped up, but healthcare costs have always been the heftiest as a family. In the US, medical issues are a major reason for people to file personal bankruptcy. Medical costs weren't just big, there were many. Their son with special needs underwent numerous therapies. They lost a daughter who died after 7 years of brain cancer. Debbie and her own cancer battle, and Nick's heart surgery. Yeah, financial situations, medical expenses can be chronic. I believe you don't have to go into bankruptcy. You can choose to pay a minimum amount, and it can be really tiny. I have a friend who works in the medical industry and said that people don't have to go to those lengths. Just because someone suggests to do it, I wouldn't necessarily do that. I would look at more options, but there are ways that you can also invest for your health in the future. Like, I've got 4 kids as well myself, and I know that everybody's health isn't always going to be great. I have a neurodiverse son who requires therapy and treatment as well, but there are other health plans that you can do, and particularly if you're young, what you can do is you can get a health savings account, and a health savings account allows you to save money that is tax advantaged, i.e. you don't pay the tax on that, and then when you spend it on qualifying expenses, you don't pay taxes either. Also, you can invest it in a fund where it can grow tax-free. A health savings account has 3 tax advantages. You don't pay any income tax on it, you don't pay on the point of payment, and it can grow tax-free. If you're young, you can take advantage of this even more. Let's say you've got more income, you've sorted out your cash flow, and you can pay for the medical expenses like an $800 ER visit or whatever it is. And you pay that with your regular income. You save that receipt until 25 50, say when you're about to retire, you can have your cash grow in that health savings account tax-free. So $800 could be like $3,000 in like 30 years or even more. And you can claim that expense, that $800, and then you've still got $2,200 or more in your account to pay for medical expenses in the future, and it can still grow in that investment class. So there are ways to actually leverage your health savings account so that you can pay for what you can afford now, and then in the future you can claim that against your health savings account and also still have money in your health savings account to look after you and your family in the future. We just never had a way to save, Debbie says. To this day, health insurance runs almost $1,000 a month. At 64, Debbie is looking forward to ditching her high premium plan when she qualifies for Medicare. Obviously paying for medical insurance, I don't know what that insurance is. I don't know if that was a HSA plan, because HSA plans often have a smaller premium per month, and that's often pretty good to do when you're young, is to have a small premium, have that tax deductible savings account, and then in the future you'll have looked after yourself essentially. It doesn't look like they've done that or taken advantage of that. I don't know if they knew that existed, but take a look at the health savings account if you have one. She believes they would have done better with more education. That's remarkable because she holds 2 master's degrees in Latin and Greek, but in academia without a doctorate, Debbie became an adjunct professor, a higher ed gig worker, making less than $30,000 a year. She couldn't afford to finish her PhD after her health problems and a funding cut by the university. So it seems like she doesn't have the problem of having an education, she just hasn't had a financial education, and that's why I'm trying to go through this article and share with you as much information that I've found, and for you to look up and research for yourself to see if it's a good fit for you, because I think there's a lot of interesting life choices that we can all make now, no matter where you are on your journey, that can make things better, like increasing your cash flow so that you can leverage credit if you do need to spend on a credit card, or leveraging cash flow to pay down your credit cards or loans or high interest loans, or leveraging cash flow to employ into investments that will over time will grow, and you can buy things with those assets and you don't need to purchase anything from your regular income. These are all things that you can do and you can start on depending on your own financial situation. And I do feel for everybody because I've been in those situations before, and I've made excuses too where I didn't contribute to my 401k when I had an employer match, and I really regret doing that now, because again, your lifestyle, as we've seen over here, adjusts with your income. Now if we take a look at Nick and Debbie's accounts, we see that their paychecks actually reduced during the pandemic, and they reduced their outgoings. So they were capable of reducing their outgoings before the pandemic, it seems, because they can do it now. Nick, 66, did not finish college, neither did I. He fell into a solid job in tech, so did I, raising from a technician to an engineer of software contracts. Then a few years his work got outsourced. Unexpectedly, he aced a college in 3D modeling, but nobody hired him. So that's also another example of doing some education and not being able to do anything with it, right? I'm sure you could do more things with 3D modeling, like create objects that you could sell on something like 3D cults. There are opportunities to leverage the skill if you just look for the places where you could generate income. So you could get a passive income from doing that one model once and then selling it multiple times in the future. And if you can do that daily, like creating a model a day or every week, your portfolio of art can be sold over and over again and can create an income, which I believe passive income like that is taxed differently than a regular salaried income as well. So let's take a look at their monthly budget. Okay, so they've got their utilities, home insurance, and cell phone. It looks like it's decreased a bit, so it looks like they may have either reduced their bills somehow or got quotes. It's worth doing it every year, checking if Geico is better than Progressive or Progressive is better than Geico, all that kind of insurance kind of thing. It's always good to look at. It looks like they were able to reduce their health insurance as well. Food, mainly groceries. It looks like they don't eat out that often, so that's good. They've got a car loan. They set some money aside for tax, which is also good. You know, that they're looking at ways to not have these big bills at the end of the year. Maybe that could be in a high interest savings account that's readily accessible, so that they're making money on the money that they're setting aside. Always think about ways that you can maximize the amount of cash that you have and use it to your full advantage. Other expenses include food for pets, insurance. What other insurance is there? Because they've already got insurance here, and then they've got health insurance here. Vet visits, books for Debbie's work. Okay, so that's reinvesting in yourself. And how often do you do that? How often do you buy the books? I forgot what she worked as. Birthday gifts, charity donations. Charity donations is interesting because obviously you can offset that against your tax. However, if you're in a situation where you're living paycheck to paycheck, there could be opportunities to invest that money, or even for your health insurance, get the tax benefits of paying into a health savings account. And I believe at certain ages you can contribute even more to it. So that may fix some of the issues that they're going through at the moment as well. If you can't afford to help yourself and pay yourself first and invest, then charitable donations may need to be reduced. I'm not saying that you shouldn't give to charity. It's a difficult thing, but there may be some opportunities to cut back in some areas, and other areas you can start investing and saving into. Nick picked up a school crossing guard gig to pay for the beer, he jokes, but he had to stop during the pandemic. Debbie's college wages lag in the summer and her tutoring dried up. They've deferred some bills and took their cats off pet insurance, cut back on the museum payments and charity donations. Okay, so it looks like they may have cut that back, but it's still other and it's still the same size, so I don't know where the cut is. Looking back, Nick ponders whether their early start on children was what got them into the paycheck to paycheck cycle. Look, I've had 4 kids. My wife and I had our first kid when my wife was 19. So we started really early on. And I did make excuses saying, oh, I've got to buy diapers. That's why I'm not paying into my 401k and things like that. If we were more disciplined and saved, not just in a savings account, but actually invested, we'd be so much better off right now. Debbie shakes her head and she says no. She says that they never had money. I don't know who was looking after the finances, whether if it was a joint thing or whether if it was a Nick thing or a Debbie thing. But I think if we all really looked at our lives, we can enjoy things. But if we pay ourselves first, no matter how much it is, even if it's $10 a month, $25 a month, you can buy into an index fund. You could buy individual stocks that pay dividends. You could buy Bitcoin. You could buy any number of assets. That $25 a month would just be a sunken expense into some other thing that you didn't earmark it for. We have a tendency to spend money because we feel it feels good. But once you start investing in yourself, that starts to feel good. And you start looking at other opportunities to increase your cash flow so that you can pay yourself more and take different opportunities. And once you invest into something that's safe, you start wanting to invest in other things that grow quicker and quicker and quicker. And you start looking at other advantages. Just like if you bought a Ford Edge car, vehicle, you'll start noticing Ford Edges everywhere. Once you start looking for opportunities to invest and pay yourself, you start seeing more opportunities to increase your worth and opportunities not to live paycheck to paycheck. Now, this last paragraph is how the author wanted to finish this article, with a quote from Debbie saying, "We just would have had more savings, so it wouldn't be quite as panicky in our gut knowing that we're pulling from our savings." Debbie was saying she needs more financial education, and just having savings isn't enough for financial education. You actually need to invest that money so it earns more, so that you become wealthy over time. She goes, "I think we'd still be living paycheck to paycheck." Now, if you do employ money into investments, it becomes an asset and it produces cash flow for you. And at that point, you won't be living paycheck to paycheck. You need to get to that escape velocity. I hope you enjoyed the overview of this article, and behind me is a piece of art by Banksy called "There's Always Hope." It's about a little girl losing a balloon, but there's always hope. She can find another balloon. Maybe it gets caught and she can get it. Maybe she finds something else that gives her pleasure and excitement. Now, that article that I just read was almost like defeatist, like you're always going to be living paycheck to paycheck. It didn't give you any financial education. It didn't mention investment once. It didn't mention cash flow once at all. If you just take one thing away from this video, is to get better cash flow. That's by either reducing your expenses, increasing your income, or doing both, and then paying yourself first, whether if it's just in a savings account initially, but then go on to invest it. You'll be thanking your past self in the future. Now, if you enjoyed this video, if you got any insight from it, please like it. Please comment about your situation, any ideas on videos you want me to cover. Please subscribe, share the video. That will help the YouTube algorithm, everybody know that this is worthwhile to watch. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next time. Welcome to the obligatory end part of the video, where I say, if you enjoyed that video, give it a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the bio. There's free stocks for Robinhood, Webull, and there's also free money from M1 Finance and free Bitcoin from Coinbase and Swan BTC. Have a good one.